Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let's get into the story. The case began like so many American cautionary tales do. A map printed off the internet. A weekend crowd certain they knew better than the land, and a quiet region that didn't ask for visitors. In late September, 4 friends from Knoxville set out to hike an unmarked corridor in the southern Appalachians, chasing a waterfall rumored to be hidden somewhere between disused fire roads and hollows with names locals didn't share. They were young, confident, and half in love with the idea of remoteness. Their phones held podcasts about vanishing people. Their backpacks carried enough protein bars to outweigh a storm. What they did not carry was the old fear that keeps you on the paved side of a boundary sign. Their names were Riley Cortez, a paramedic trainee with a habit of documenting everything; Owen Black, whose drone footage of abandoned towns got modest traction online; Tessa McKenna, a geology student fond of outcrops and quarried stories; and Marcus Bell, a high school history teacher who liked telling campfire legends with an earnest smile. They left their cars at a state lot before dawn, entered a pine corridor that narrowed into laurel and hemlock, and stepped beyond a rusted chain that once held a warning placard. The placard was now missing. The chain was taken as a suggestion. When they crossed it, the forest altered in a way that is easier to understand after the fact. The air felt denser, the trees crowding each other, bark scarred by parallel grooves like a language you were never meant to read. Riley filmed it with the same tone she used for farmers markets and graduation parties. She said the grooves looked like tally marks. Owen said they were clawed by bears. Tessa said they were made with tools, not claws. Marcus said nothing, though later his sister would tell investigators he had grown quiet in recent weeks, sleeping poorly, leaving the porch light on all night. By mid-morning, the group found a stream that ducked under root braids and reappeared slick as slate, pointing them deeper into folds of earth. Owen flew the drone above the canopy and caught the tail of fog lifting from a basin, a pale veil snagging on ridgelines. He panned left and spoke about composition. He did not say what the drone also saw, because he didn't see it then. A ringed clearing, the grass inside pressed low, the ground around it busy with tracks that weren't quite boot prints. At a bend in the stream, they noticed the first marker. It wasn't a stack of stones or ribboned branch, the usual grammar of trail culture. It was a vertebra threaded on a strip of leather, bleached to a rosary's white, hanging from a sapling at eye level. Riley filmed it, laughing at her own goosebumps. Tessa touched the bone and said deer. Marcus asked her to stop. He said it too gently, more like a request to lower a voice in a library than an admonition. They moved on. Locals later told me the ridge they entered had a private name that never appeared on survey maps, a name that warns the mouth not to open too wide. People still hunt there, yes, but not in the way that appears on seasonal charts. Old families with mailboxes a county away pass the word down. Keep out of that saddle past the last switchback. Don't go there after the first cold snap. Don't bring children to the creek when the fog sticks in the branches. Outsiders dismiss such counsel as folklore. Outsiders also purchase bright tents. The second marker arrived as scent before sight, a sweetness that didn't match the day, the cloying weight of something that should have been buried. The 4 followed it as if to disprove each other's nerves. The trail dissolved into a flat where sunlight made a brief stage through the needles. There, caught between 2 crossed sticks as if offered to the air, hung a length of hide. Tessa said it was pig. Marcus said it wasn't. Riley tried to frame a shot without the flies. Owen lowered the drone case to the dirt and said something about ritual spaces. Managing a tone meant to stay ironic. No one touched this piece. They kept walking until the forest began to repeat. A spent shell casing near a stump. A carved spiral scored into bark and filled with charcoal. Twine that wasn't twine but vine stripped of its leaves and braided. The path offered small proofs of presence but no people. Their jokes thinned. Their words turned into inventory. Water bottles, battery levels, the slope they would need to regain to hit the fire road by dusk. In her footage, Riley said she felt watched. Then she smiled at the camera to dilute the statement. She did not delete it later. By early afternoon, they reached the ringed clearing the drone had grazed. A shallow bowl floored in grass cropped short, the perimeter stitched with saplings bent toward its center. It had the geometry of a place used for meeting or making. At the near edge lay a scatter of broken glass and rusted tin. At the far edge, under a ledge of rock charred by years of flame, were bones. The group said animal again, because that word was safe and accurate often enough to use as a bridge. Yet the way the bones had been arranged, long to short, knotted at joints by lengths of leather, suggested a hand that knew classification as both utility and devotion. Marcus crouched at the pile and picked up a fragment with a hole through it. He did not say what the hole implied. Owen's camera fixed on the curve of a jaw, half buried. Tessa traced ash with a twig, pointing out a seam where fat had burned hot. Riley filmed the others from behind, their bodies becoming silhouettes against the blue daylight, and told the lens they had found something that deserved a call to the ranger station. No one had a signal. That fact felt theatrical at first, then simply heavy. If we pause the tape here, this is the last moment they were just hikers trespassing on a story. After this, the story would claim them as characters. On Riley's final video of the day, a shape moves at the tree line. Not a person exactly, not in the sense that would reassure a lost traveler. A figure smudged by distance, skin that reads darker not by pigment but by the smear of ash and soil, hair matted into ropes, eyes that do not blink when viewed frame by frame. The figure holds something low and curved. It does not step forward. It only accepts that the group has seen it, and that knowing is enough. When the four finally voted to turn back, the sun had begun its slow descent, and the temperature followed. They tried to retrace the stream, only to find that the water braided into channels they hadn't noticed before. The chain they crossed that morning did not lead to a visible corridor anymore. The forest looked similar but not sympathetic. Riley said they could camp and wait for daylight. Marcus said they would keep moving while they had light. Owen launched the drone for a final scan, elevated it above the canopy, and watched the feed populate with an image he did not expect. Their own clearing, newly occupied by three figures standing shoulder to shoulder at the center of the ring, heads tilted, faces unreadable. The drone drifted and the feed cut to static. They were not alone in those hills, and someone had been waiting longer than the four could imagine. The official timeline says the group vanished sometime between late afternoon and the following morning. What we can reconstruct relies on fragments. Riley's video logs, Owen's corrupted drone files, and scattered evidence found during the search weeks later. What is certain is that the forest did not release them easily. As the evening fell, they pressed forward, hoping to reconnect with the ridge trail. Marcus led, his voice measured but low. He repeated directions as if they were scripture. Keep the slope on your left, follow the drainage downhill. Yet each turn led to terrain that betrayed memory. The landmarks they swore they passed hours earlier. The lightning-struck oak. The mossy rock face appeared in different sequences, as though rearranged by a patient hand. Riley filmed their faces in the last light. Tessa's lips were pale, cracked from thirst. Owen forced optimism, cracking jokes about being castaways. Marcus walked ahead, shoulders tight, muttering under his breath. Riley's voice trembled when she tried to reassure the camera that they would find the fire road before nightfall. She zoomed in on the horizon through the trees. The image wavered. Between the trunks, a tall figure appeared for less than a second, then vanished. Riley gasped, lowered the camera, and swore it was only a shadow. Night came faster than they expected. The canopy swallowed the moon. With no signal and no way back, they built a fire from deadfall. The flames pushed back the dark, but not the silence. There were no crickets, no owls, only the sound of branches shifting high above. At some point, a sharp crack echoed from the tree line. They froze. Another followed, closer this time, wood striking wood in a steady rhythm. 3 beats, then pause. 3 beats again. It was not random. It was a signal. Tessa whispered that it was just the forest, but Marcus shook his head. He told them not to answer, not to imitate it. Owen, restless, suggested recording the sound. But when he lifted the mic, the knocking stopped. In the sudden silence, something else emerged. Faint voices. Not words in English, not anything Riley could later identify, but a guttural chant carried by several throats. The fire snapped loudly, as if to drown it out. They didn't sleep. Hours bled together until Riley's footage showed the fire dwindling. Her camera panned across the clearing and caught the glow of eyeshine reflecting from the tree line. Dozens of them. The eyes did not blink. They shifted only when the fire collapsed into ash. At dawn, they abandoned camp. The forest seemed brighter, almost forgiving, but the sense of being stalked did not fade. Owen reviewed the drone footage on his laptop while they walked. His face drained of color. He replayed a sequence from the previous night. Not static, as he had thought, but blurred figures weaving between trees, circling the camp from multiple sides. Their movements were deliberate, their bodies smeared with mud, torsos bare despite the cold. He closed the laptop without a word. By midday, they stumbled into another clearing. This one was smaller, ringed with sharpened stakes driven into the soil at an angle. Some held scraps of fabric, others small bones strung like ornaments. The center was bare earth, darkened as if scorched repeatedly. A smell hung in the air, burnt meat, acrid and undeniable. Marcus whispered that they needed to leave at once, but as they turned, they saw it. Footprints, not boots. Bare feet, wide and calloused, pressed deep into the mud. The tracks led in and out of the clearing surrounding theirs. It was then they realized they had been herded. Every turn, every misstep had been directed. The tribe had guided them here without ever showing their full presence. And now, Riley's camera caught the sound that would haunt investigators later. A child's laughter. Faint, carried by the wind. They spun, scanning the trees, but saw nothing. The group broke into a run. Branches tore at their clothes. Riley's footage blurred as she stumbled but kept filming. Owen cursed that they were lost in a trap. Tessa sobbed that they should have stayed on the main trail. Marcus urged them forward, voice cracking into desperation. Then, on the recording, a scream tore through the forest. It wasn't from them. It was high, sharp, and abruptly cut off. The four froze, clutching each other, staring into the trees. For a moment, silence reigned again. Then the knocking resumed, closer, louder. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. They had entered someone else's territory, and that someone was closing in. The first disappearance occurred near what searchers later labeled Point K3, a saddle where 2 deer paths cross and fall away into laurel thickets. Riley's video shows the moment before it happened. Marcus ahead, Tessa close behind, Owen trailing to watch their back. The camera dips as Riley adjusts her pack, lifts again, and the frame catches Owen through a screen of leaves 2 strides behind. He lifts a hand to signal he's stopping to tie a bootlace. Riley nods, keeps moving. 30 seconds later, she pans back and he is gone. No shout, no rustle. Just absence, clean as a cut. They retraced their steps, calling his name. The forest returned their voices as muffled reflections. On the ground, kneeling in the duff, Marcus found the place where Owen's weight had pressed into the leaves and then ceased. Around it, marks like the impressions of woven soles, not modern tread. Riley filmed Marcus's hands hovering above the evidence, refusing to touch it as if contact would finalize something they weren't ready to accept. Tessa whispered that they needed to mark the spot for rescue. Marcus said they were the rescue. From this point, the record fragments into 2 parallel tracks, what the survivors saw and what investigators later read in the terrain. There were snares set low to the ground composed of braided vine and antler toggles. There were bent saplings held in tension by gut, designed to whip tight and lift a limb from the earth. There were paths that looked like paths until you committed your weight to them, at which point they became slides leading into pits lined with sharpened stakes that somehow avoided lethality but ensured injury. These were not relics. They were maintained. The 3 moved cautiously, whispering. Riley's breath was audible on the mic. She said Owen might be circling to find an opening, that he was practical and would follow their calls. Marcus shook his head. He muttered that this wasn't random. He began leaving small markers, knots tied in low branches, a strip from his flannel caught on a thorn, an old trick to feel less hunted. Tessa's hands shook so badly she had to ask Riley to tighten the straps on her pack. On the footage, her eyes look older than she is. Toward dusk, they found smoke. It crawled low between trunks, a pale seam that suggested a controlled burn. Following it, they reached a hollow scabbed with fire pits and ringed by crude shelters. The shelters were made from saplings bent and lashed, hides stretched over frames, doorways low enough that an adult would have to crawl to enter. Bones lay near the pits in ordered piles, arranged by size and type, scraped clean not by scavengers but by deliberate hands. A jewelry of teeth hung from a crossbar, interspersed with carved wooden discs incised with symbols that looked like a map had been taught to stutter. Riley's camera shakes when she zooms into the pits. She repeats the word animal, then corrects herself mid-breath. Marcus steps into frame, blocking the view. He says they're leaving. He says it with a finality that sticks to the spine of the moment. Tessa nods too quickly, as if nodding could erase what's been seen. They retreat uphill, away from the smoke, away from the shelters. But the forest has learned their rhythm. Between trees, shapes move in tandem, close enough to suggest coordination, far enough to deny a clean view. They make a plan. It's simple in the way that plans under pressure must be. Follow the ridgeline east until they hit a maintained trail or a boundary fence. Keep moving. Do not divide. When night falls, find high ground and stay silent. Riley records the plan, repeating it like a vow. Her voice steadies as if structure alone could keep them intact. They do not reach the ridge. The ground tilts into a gully clogged with rhododendron, each glossy leaf wet with condensation though the air is bone dry. In the gully's center stands a totem constructed from lashed branches and sinew. Fixed to it at shoulder height is a human scapula, weathered smooth by touch. On the bone, a symbol appears again and again. 3 vertical lines, a gap, 3 more. The same cadence as the knocking. Tessa runs a finger over the grooves and jerks back as if shocked. Marcus takes her hand and pulls her away. Riley whispers that the symbol is a boundary mark. Marcus answers that it's a counting system. Later, a forensic anthropologist would study photos from the site and explain that the cuts on the bones were consistent with stone tools sharpened along one edge and hafted into handles. She would speak carefully about cultural continuity, about communities that survive by refusing contact, about ritual consumption as a means of carrying ancestors within the living. She would not speculate on the tribe's current numbers. She would say only that the pattern suggested a practice, not an accident. In the hour between sunset and true dark, the 3 found an old homestead ruin. The stone foundation of a house collapsed inward, the remnants of a chimney, a cellar hole covered by planks silvered with age. It looked like a leftover from the 19th century, the kind of place history forgets until hikers find it and photograph it for social media. Marcus pried up a plank. The cellar sank into black. Cooler air rose from below. He climbed down first, then helped Tessa, then Riley. They lowered the plank, leaving an inch of aperture for air. The camera kept recording, pointed at the rectangle of dimming sky. Above them, footsteps padded past with the silence of bare feet. Then came the sound they had learned to dread, muffled by earth but unmistakable. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more, as if the land itself were echoing a code. Riley's breath quickened on the audio. Tessa asked how long they would wait. Marcus said until morning. He said it again when the knocking shifted into voices. The voices were not pleading or angry. They were matter-of-fact, a cadence like instructions. Somewhere close, something scraped against stone. Dust filtered down into their hair. In the cellar, they found artifacts. Jars with wax seals cracked by time, a rusted saw, a child's shoe hard as kiln-fired clay. Riley trained the lens on the shoe as if its scale would remind the knight that people once lived here under laws that made sense. Marcus pulled a length of iron from the debris and held it like a club. Tessa pressed her palms to her ears. Hours bled. At some point, the voices turned into a low hum that vibrated through the floor. At some point, Riley began to cry without sound. Just before dawn, the hum stopped. Silence rose so suddenly it rang. Marcus lifted the plank a fraction. The world outside was gray and granted them a corridor of fog. He signaled. They climbed out, stiff and salt-stained, and ran. They did not get far. On the slope above the homestead, stakes had been driven into the ground overnight, angled to funnel movement toward a narrow chute. At the chute's end, a pit yawned, disguised with a lattice of twigs and leaf litter. Marcus saw it at the last second and shoved Riley sideways. He fell, shoulder catching the edge, body pinwheeling into the hole. The camera tumbled, landing at the rim, still recording. Riley's hands clawed into view, scraping soil to find purchase. Tessa's face hovered, eyes blown wide. From the pit came Marcus's voice, low and pained but controlled, telling them to run. His tone changed mid-sentence, not because of pain, but because something in the pit moved that did not belong to him. The recording ends in a scramble of soil and breath. Searchers would later find the homestead ruin. They would find the planks replaced, heavier stones set on top. They would find footprints leading away in a looping pattern that suggested a dance or a test. They would not find the pit. They would say erosion filled it. They would say the forest closes. They would choose language that explains without naming. When the search finally began, triggered by families who expected texts that never came, the forest yielded little. Helicopters traced the ridges. Volunteers combed creek beds. Cadaver dogs alerted near the homestead ruins but gave no consistent lead. The official report lists environmental exposure as the likely cause of death. Unofficially, deputies spoke of evidence they could not log. Bones arranged too carefully, footprints too numerous to belong to 3 hikers, and symbols carved fresh into bark within days of the disappearance. Riley's camera was recovered weeks later, water damaged but not destroyed. The final file runs less than 4 minutes. It begins with her whisper, fragmented by static saying they had to keep moving east, that Marcus told them to run. The lens sways through undergrowth, then steadies as she turns it toward Tessa. Her friend's face is pale, lips cracked, eyes swollen with exhaustion. Behind her, at the tree line, figures stand motionless. They are lean, their skin smeared with ash, hair bound in knots, teeth visible not in smiles but in something colder. Each carries a tool carved from bone or stone. The sound of knocking begins again. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. Tessa sobs and covers her ears. Riley whispers, "They don't let you leave." The footage cuts abruptly to black. Neither Riley nor Tessa was ever found. Marcus and Owen remain listed as missing, presumed deceased. Their families still light candles each September. Locals in the Appalachians continue to warn visitors away from certain hollows, their voices lowered when the subject arises. Outsiders call it superstition, but hikers vanish there with unsettling regularity, their names added quietly to old lists. Some say the tribe is only a myth crafted from fear of the wilderness. Others point to the artifacts cataloged and then quietly removed from evidence. What remains is a pattern. Knocks that echo through the hills, symbols carved into bark, and eyes that glimmer just beyond the firelight. The story of Riley, Owen, Tessa, and Marcus ends without rescue, but the forest keeps telling it. And if you wander too deep into those ridges, past chains meant to deter, past warnings whispered at diner counters, you may hear the same cadence. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. A signal that you have crossed a boundary. A reminder that some tribes never left, and some hungers never die.